In a distant corner of the galaxy, far beyond the reach of most star charts, there was a planet called Krythos. It wasn't just any planet. It was a death world. Every inch of its surface seemed designed to test the limits of survival. Towering, storms raged across its continents, tearing apart mountains and flattening forests. Rivers of acid carved jagged paths through barren landscapes, while venomous creatures with razor-sharp teeth lurked in shadows so thick they seemed alive. The air itself was toxic, filled with particles that could corrode metal and burn unprotected skin within minutes. Yet despite all this, life thrived on Krythos, specifically the Krythians. The Krythians were a proud species, tall and muscular, their bodies covered in thick, scaly hides that protected them from the harsh environment. Their eyes glowed faintly, in the dark, allowing them to see clearly even in the dimmest light. Over countless generations, they had adapted perfectly to their brutal home, developing instincts sharper than the claws of the predators that stalked them. They built their cities underground, hidden beneath layers of rock and soil, safe from the fury of the storms above. Each day was a battle for survival, but the Krythians wore their struggles like badges of honor. To them, Krythos wasn't just their home, it was proof of their strength. They believed themselves to be the ultimate survivors, unmatched by any other beings in the universe. For as long as anyone could remember, the Krythians lived in isolation. No one visited Krythos because no one dared. The few explorers who tried never returned. This suited the Krythians just fine. They didn't need outsiders coming to their world, questioning their ways or trying to change things. Life was hard, yes, but it was theirs, and they liked it that way. But then, one fateful day, everything changed. It began with a strange light in the sky, a fiery streak cutting through the clouds above the largest Krythian city. At first, many thought it was another storm, perhaps bigger and more violent than usual. But as the object descended, it became clear that this was no natural phenomenon. It was a ship, or rather several ships. A fleet of sleek metallic vessels pierced the atmosphere, their engines roaring like thunder. The Krythians watched in stunned silence as the ships landed outside their city, kicking up clouds of dust and debris. For a moment, no one moved. Then slowly, cautiously, the Krythians emerged from their underground homes to investigate. What they found shocked them. Stepping out of the ships were creatures unlike anything the Krythians had ever seen before. Humans. These new arrivals were small compared to the towering Krythians, their bodies fragile-looking and unarmored. Their skin was soft and vulnerable, their limbs thin and delicate. Some carried weapons, but they looked primitive compared to the sharp claws and fangs the Krythians used to fend off predators. At first glance, the humans appeared laughably ill-equipped to survive on a planet as dangerous as Krythos. Yet here they were, standing boldly in the face of danger, their expressions determined rather than fearful. The leader of the human group stepped forward, raising a hand in what seemed to be a gesture of peace. He spoke in a language the Krythians couldn't understand, his voice calm but firm. Behind him, others began unloading supplies from the ships, setting up temporary shelters and scanning the area with strange devices. The Krythians exchanged wary glances. Who were these people? Where had they come from? And why had they chosen Krythos, a place notorious for killing even the strongest creatures, as their destination? Curiosity eventually overcame caution. One of the Krythians, a warrior named Varnock, approached the humans. His imposing figure loomed over them, his glowing eyes fixed intently on the human leader. Varnock growled low in his throat, a sound meant to intimidate, but the human leader didn't flinch. Instead, he pointed to himself and said something that sounded like, "Ethan." Then he pointed at Varnock, waiting. After a moment, Varnock grunted and tapped his chest. "Varnock," he said, his deep voice rumbling like distant thunder. A flicker of understanding passed between them. Using gestures and broken attempts at communication, the two groups began to piece together fragments of each other's stories. The humans, it turned out, weren't travelers or invaders, they were refugees. Their own world had been destroyed by war, forcing them to flee across the stars in search of a new home. When their damaged ships detected Krythos, they had little choice but to land here, hoping to repair their vessels and continue their journey. They hadn't known how hostile the planet would be, or that it was already inhabited. The Crythians listened silently, their expressions unreadable. On one hand, they felt sympathy for the humans' plight. No one deserved to lose their home. On the other hand, they couldn't help but wonder if letting these outsiders stay was a mistake. How could such fragile beings possibly survive on Krythos? Wouldn't they just become burdens, requiring constant protection and resources? Crythians could barely spare for themselves? Despite their doubts, the Crythians decided to give the humans a chance. They allowed them to remain temporarily, granting access to certain areas where they could set up camp and begin repairs. In return, the humans promised not to interfere with Crythian territory or disrupt their way of life. It was an uneasy truce marked by suspicion on both sides, but it held, for now. As days turned into weeks, the Crythians kept a close eye on their unexpected guests. They observed the humans closely, curious about how they would handle the challenges of living on Krythos. Would they collapse under the pressure, as so many others might have? Or would they find some way to endure? To everyone's surprise, the humans proved tougher than they looked. When predatory beasts attacked their camps, the humans responded not with panic, but with precision. They deployed traps and barriers made from materials scavenged from their ships, using technology the Crythians had never seen before. Energy weapons capable of stunning even the largest predators without harming the environment. Drones that flew overhead, mapping the terrain and identifying threats before they struck. Portable shelters reinforced with alloys that resisted the corrosive effects of the acidic rain. Every problem Krythos threw at them, the humans countered, with ingenuity and determination. At first, the Crythians were impressed. These humans might not have the physical strength of the Crythians, but they possessed something else: intelligence. They didn't rely solely on brute force. Instead, they used tools and strategies to overcome obstacles. It was a revelation, one that forced the Crythians to reconsider their assumptions about survival. Perhaps strength wasn't the only measure of resilience. However, admiration soon gave way to unease. As the humans continued to adapt and thrive, the Crythians began to feel threatened. Not physically, of course, the humans posed no direct danger, but emotionally. For centuries, the Crythians had prided themselves on being the ultimate survivors, the toughest species in the galaxy. Now these newcomers were proving that survival wasn't just about raw power. Was it possible that the Crythians weren't as invincible as they'd always believed? This question gnawed at them, planting seeds of doubt that grew with each passing day. The humans weren't just surviving, they were flourishing. They established trade routes with nearby settlements, exchanging goods and knowledge. They shared techniques for purifying water and growing food in hostile environments. Slowly but surely, they were making Krythos their own, and the Crythians weren't sure how to feel about it. Some welcomed the change, seeing potential in combining human innovation with Crythian resilience. Others resisted, fearing that their culture and traditions would be overshadowed by this foreign influence. Tensions simmered beneath the surface, threatening to boil over at any moment. Meanwhile, the humans faced challenges of their own. While they were adapting well to Krythos, not everyone was convinced staying was the right decision. Many argued that the planet's dangers outweighed its benefits. Others believed that humanity had finally found a place where they truly belonged, not as conquerors but as equals. These debates divided the human community, adding another layer of complexity to their already precarious situation. And yet, amidst all the uncertainty, one thing remained clear. Whether they liked it or not, Crythians and humans were now bound together by fate. Neither side could afford to ignore the other, not when the survival of both depended on finding common ground. Little did they know, their greatest test was still to come, and it would force them to confront not only the perils of Krythos, but also the deepest fears and insecurities within themselves. As the weeks stretched into months, the presence of humanity on Krythos became less of a temporary anomaly and more of an undeniable reality. The humans had settled into their makeshift camps, transforming barren patches of land into functional hubs of activity. Their shelters, once crude and hastily constructed, now gleamed with reinforced materials and advanced technology. Solar panels harvested energy from the dim sunlight that filtered through Krythos's thick atmosphere, while filtration systems turned toxic rainwater into clean drinking water. The humans worked tirelessly, their determination evident in every structure they built and every challenge they overcame. The Krythians, meanwhile, continued to watch them with a mixture of fascination and unease. At first, the humans' reliance on tools and machines seemed like a weakness, a crutch for beings who lacked the raw strength and instincts of the Krythians. But as time went on, it became clear that these tools were far from limitations. They were extensions of human ingenuity. Where the Krythians used brute force to carve paths through dense forests or fend off predators, the humans employed strategies that minimized risk and maximized efficiency. They didn't fight the planet's dangers head-on. They outsmarted them. One incident in particular left a lasting impression on the Krythians. A group of humans had ventured into a region known as the Venom Marsh, a treacherous expanse teeming with carnivorous plants and venomous creatures. To the Krythians, this area was infamous for claiming even the strongest warriors who dared enter it. Yet, when the humans emerged unscathed hours later, dragging behind them a massive load of rare medicinal herbs, the Krythians couldn't help but marvel at what they had accomplished. Instead of charging into the marsh blindly, the humans had studied its patterns, mapping safe routes using drones equipped with sensors capable of detecting hidden threats. They neutralized venomous plants by deploying chemical sprays carried by robotic drones, ensuring their path remained clear without ever putting themselves directly in harm's way. This event sparked heated discussions among the Krythians. Some admired the humans' resourcefulness, seeing it as proof that survival wasn't solely about physical prowess. Others, however, felt uneasy. These humans weren't just surviving, they were thriving. And their success raised uncomfortable questions. If humans could adapt so quickly to Krythos, did that mean the planet wasn't as deadly as everyone believed? Or worse, did it mean the Krythians weren't as special as they thought? These doubts festered quietly until one evening, during a gathering of Krythian elders. Varnok, the warrior who had first approached the humans, stood before the council, his glowing eyes reflecting both frustration and admiration. "They are not like us," he said, his deep voice echoing through the cavernous chamber. "They do not rely on strength or instinct. They use machines, plans, and tricks we cannot understand. Yet they survive, they thrive. How can we call ourselves the ultimate survivors if these outsiders can match us?" His words ignited a firestorm of debate. One elder, a grizzled veteran, named Dracor, slammed his fist against the table. "They are weak," he growled. "Their bodies are soft, their weapons fragile. Without their machines, they would perish within days. This is not survival, it is cheating." Another elder, a wise female named Scylla, countered him. "Cheating or innovation? We have always prided ourselves on our ability to endure. But endurance is not the same as progress. Perhaps these humans have something to teach us, something we have been too proud to see." The argument raged late into the night, dividing the council and spilling out into the wider community. For the first time in generations, the Krythians found themselves questioning the very foundation of their identity. Were they truly the masters of survival? Or had they simply grown complacent, relying on brute strength while ignoring other paths to resilience? Determined to settle the matter once and for all, the Krythians decided to issue a challenge to the humans. It would be a series of trials designed to test the limits of endurance, combat, and survival. The stakes were high. If the humans succeeded, the Krythians would acknowledge them as equals. If they failed, they would leave Krythos forever. When Ethan, the human leader, heard about the challenge, he hesitated. He knew the risks involved, not just for himself and his people, but for the fragile relationship they had begun to build with the Krythians. Still, he also understood the importance of proving themselves. "We didn't come here to conquer," he told his team. "But we can't let fear stop us from showing who we are. If we want to stay, we have to earn their respect. The first trial took place in the Razor Canyons, a labyrinthine network of jagged cliffs and narrow ledges carved by centuries of relentless winds. The task was simple yet perilous. Retrieve a sacred crystal embedded in the heart of the canyon. Both teams would start at the same time, and whichever group returned with the crystal first would win the trial. From the moment the challenge began, the differences between the two species became glaringly obvious. The Crythians moved with incredible speed and agility, scaling sheer rock faces with ease and leaping across gaps that would have sent most humans plummeting to their deaths. They relied on their instincts, trusting their bodies to guide them safely through the treacherous terrain. The humans, on the other hand, took a different approach. Before setting foot in the canyon, they deployed a fleet of reconnaissance drones to map the safest route. Using wrist-mounted devices, they marked hazardous zones and identified shortcuts invisible to the naked eye. When they encountered impassable sections, they used grappling hooks and collapsible bridges to create new paths. At one point, a Crythian warrior named Tarka spotted a human struggling to cross a particularly narrow ledge. With a sneer, he called out, "Why don't you fly like your machines?" The human, a young engineer named Mia, simply smiled and activated a magnetic tether attached to her belt. In seconds, she zipped across the gap, landing gracefully on the other side. Tarka's smirk vanished, replaced by a flicker of grudging respect. By the time the humans reached the crystal, the Crythians were already there, panting and bruised from their reckless dash through the canyon. But as the humans carefully extracted the crystal using specialized tools, the Crythians realized they had overlooked a crucial detail. The crystal was surrounded by a field of unstable energy that triggered tremors whenever disturbed. Without proper precautions, removing it would have caused a collapse. The humans, however, had anticipated the danger and neutralized it with precision. When the humans returned to the starting point, crystal in hand, the Crythians erupted into murmurs of disbelief. They had lost, not because the humans were stronger or faster, but because they had thought ahead. For the first time, many Crythians began to question whether strength alone was enough to define greatness. The second trial pushed both groups even further. It was held in the Ashlands, a desolate wasteland where temperatures soared during the day and plummeted at night. The objective was to survive for 3 days with limited supplies, navigating the harsh environment and avoiding ambushes from packs of razor-toothed predators. Here the Crythians excelled, using their heightened senses to detect danger long before the humans could. But the humans countered with teamwork and strategy, setting up decoys and traps that confused and deterred the predators. By the end of the trial, both groups had endured unimaginable hardships, but the humans' ability to adapt and innovate had earned them another victory. Despite their losses, the Crythians refused to admit defeat. The final trial would take place in the Storm Vale, a region perpetually shrouded in violent electrical storms. The task was to retrieve a rare flower that grew only atop a towering spire in the center of the storm. No one, Crythian or otherwise, had ever attempted such a feat and lived to tell the tale. As the two teams prepared for the challenge, tensions ran higher than ever. The Crythians saw this as their last chance to prove their superiority, while the humans viewed it as the ultimate test of their resolve. What neither side realized, however, was that the true challenge wouldn't be the storm itself, but the bonds they would forge in the face of shared adversity. Little did they know, the Storm Vale would become the crucible that transformed rivalry into respect and strangers into allies. And when the trial ended, the fate of Krathos and its people would never be the same again. The final trial loomed over both the Crythians and the humans like a storm cloud heavy with tension. The Storm Vale, as it was called, was a place of legend even among the Crythians. Its towering spires rose like jagged teeth against the horizon, surrounded by an unrelenting electrical storm that crackled and roared day and night. Lightning danced across the sky in chaotic patterns, striking the ground with enough force to split boulders. Winds howled at speeds that could tear flesh from bone, and the air itself was charged with energy so intense it made every hair stand on end. The task was simple in theory, but nearly impossible in practice. Retrieve the crystal bloom, a rare flower that grew only atop the tallest spire in the storm veil. It was said to glow faintly in the dark, its petals shimmering like liquid light. To the Crithians, it symbolized resilience, blooming amidst chaos and destruction. For the humans, it represented hope, a reminder that beauty could exist even in the harshest environments. Whoever returned with the crystal bloom would not only win the trial, but also earn the respect of their rivals. As dawn broke on the day of the challenge, both groups assembled at the edge of the storm veil. The Crithians stood tall and imposing, their scaly hides gleaming under the pale sunlight. Varnock stepped forward, his voice steady as he addressed Ethan and the human team. "This is your last chance," he said, his eyes narrowing. "Prove yourselves if you can." Ethan nodded, his expression calm but resolute. "We're ready," he replied simply. With that, the two teams entered the storm together, their paths diverging almost immediately. The Crithians moved as they always did, with raw power and instinct. They braced themselves against the ferocious winds, muscles straining as they fought their way forward. Their glowing eyes cut through the haze of lightning and rain, guiding them toward the distant spire. Each step was a battle, each breath a struggle, but they pressed on without hesitation. This was their element, or so they believed. The humans, however, took a different approach. Before stepping foot into the storm, they had spent hours preparing. Drones equipped with advanced sensors mapped out potential routes, identifying areas where the lightning strikes were less frequent and the winds slightly calmer. Portable shield generators created temporary barriers to protect them from the worst of the storm's fury. And instead of charging ahead blindly, they worked as a coordinated unit, moving methodically and efficiently. At first, the Crithians dismissed these preparations as unnecessary delays. "They waste time hiding behind their machines," muttered Tarka, shaking his head in disdain. But as the storm intensified, the humans' strategy began to pay off. While the Crithians were forced to take longer, more treacherous paths to avoid deadly lightning strikes, the humans navigated safer zones identified by their drones. When a sudden gust knocked several Crithians off balance, sending them tumbling dangerously close to a cliff edge, the humans remained steady, anchored by magnetic boots designed for such conditions. Still, the journey was far from easy. Halfway to the spire, disaster struck. A massive bolt of lightning struck the ground near the human group, disabling one of their shield generators and scattering their equipment. Panic threatened to creep in, but Ethan quickly rallied his team. "Stay focused," he shouted over the howling wind. "We knew this wouldn't be easy. Fix what you can and keep moving." Mia, the young engineer who had impressed everyone during the Razor Canyon's trial, sprang into action. She pulled out a compact toolkit and began repairing the damaged generator, while others secured loose gear. Within minutes, the shield was back online, though weaker than before. It was enough to buy them time, but barely. Meanwhile, the Crithians faced challenges of their own. Relentless winds battered them relentlessly, forcing them to crawl on all fours to avoid being swept away. One warrior, a burly male named Grook, lost his footing entirely and disappeared into the swirling mists below. His comrades paused briefly, mourning their fallen comrade, but there was no time for grief. They pushed onward, driven by pride and determination. As the two groups drew closer to the spire, their paths converged once again. Both teams reached the base of the towering structure at nearly the same time, exhausted but unwilling to give up. The climb ahead was daunting, slick with rain and lashed by winds that threatened to rip anyone from the rock face. Here, the Crithians seemed to have the advantage. Their claws dug deep into the stone, allowing them to scale the spire with relative ease. The humans, lacking natural climbing abilities, relied on grappling hooks and magnetic anchors to ascend. But the storm wasn't done testing them yet. Just as the Crithians neared the summit, a deafening roar echoed through the air. A massive creature emerged from the clouds, a storm worm, its serpentine body crackling with electricity. Its eyes glowed with a predatory hunger, and its jaws opened wide, revealing rows of razor-sharp teeth. The worm circled the spire, unleashing bolts of lightning that sent both teams scrambling for cover. For a moment, chaos reigned. The Crythians attacked instinctively, leaping onto the worm's back and slashing at its scales with their claws. But the beast was too large, too powerful. Every strike seemed to do little more than enrage it further. The humans, realizing brute force wouldn't work, regrouped and devised a plan. Using their remaining drones, they launched a coordinated assault, targeting the worm's weak points, its eyes and throat. Energy weapons fired precise bursts of plasma, distracting the creature long enough for the Crythians to deliver a fatal blow. When the worm finally collapsed, crashing to the ground with a thunderous boom, both teams were battered and bruised, but alive. For the first time, they shared a look of mutual respect. They hadn't defeated the worm alone, they had done it together. Reaching the summit was the final hurdle. Exhausted but determined, the humans and Crythians climbed side by side, helping each other when limbs faltered or grips slipped. At last, they reached the top, where the crystal bloom swayed gently in the storm's aftermath. Its petals shimmered like starlight, casting a soft glow over the weary faces of those who had come so far to claim it. No one spoke as Ethan carefully plucked the flower from its perch. Instead, he turned to Varnock and held it out. "This isn't just ours," he said quietly. "It belongs to all of us." Varnock hesitated, then nodded. "You've earned it," he admitted grudgingly. "And maybe we've learned something from you." The journey back was quieter than the ascent, marked by a newfound understanding between the two groups. The rivalry that had fueled them for so long had given way to something deeper: respect. The humans weren't weak. They were adaptable, innovative, and resilient in ways the Crythians had never considered. And the Crythians weren't mindless brutes. They were courageous, enduring, and fiercely protective of their home. When they returned to the starting point, the elders of both species gathered to witness the outcome. There were no cheers, no declarations of victory. Instead, there was silence, a profound recognition of what had been achieved. The humans had proven they could survive on Krythos, not by conquering it, but by learning to coexist with its dangers. And the Crythians had discovered that survival wasn't just about strength. It was about adaptability, cooperation, and the willingness to embrace change. That night, under the flickering glow of the crystal bloom, the Crythians and humans shared a meal for the first time. Stories were exchanged, laughter mingled with the crackle of fire, and bonds began to form. For the first time since humanity's arrival, Krythos felt less like a battleground and more like a shared home. Yet even as peace settled over the camp, whispers of uncertainty lingered. Not everyone was ready to accept this new reality. Some Crythians feared losing their traditions, their identity, to the encroaching influence of human technology. Others worried that the alliance was built on shaky ground, destined to crumble under pressure. Among the humans, debates continued about whether staying on Krythos was truly worth the cost. The planet was still dangerous, unpredictable, and unforgiving. Could they truly build a future here? These questions hung in the air unanswered for now. But one thing was certain: Krythos had changed. No longer was it simply a death world ruled by fear and survival. It was becoming something else, something greater, a place where two vastly different peoples were learning to stand together against the storms, both literal and metaphorical, and somewhere beyond the horizon another storm was brewing, one that would test everything they had built and force them to confront the true meaning of unity. The fragile peace between the Crythians and humans began to show cracks almost immediately after the trials. While some celebrated their newfound cooperation, others grew restless, their doubts festering like open wounds. Among the Crythians, there was a growing divide. Traditionalists, led by Dracor, argued that embracing human ways would weaken their culture and erode the very essence of what made them Crythian. "We survived this world for centuries without their machines," he thundered during one heated council meeting. "Why should we change now? Their presence will only make us soft." On the other side were the progressives championed by Scylla, who believed that combining human innovation with Crithian resilience could lead to something extraordinary. Change is not weakness, she countered, her voice calm but firm. It is growth. Look at how far we've come already. Look at what we can achieve together. Meanwhile, among the humans, similar tensions simmered. Some saw Krithos as a temporary refuge, a stepping stone to finding a safer home elsewhere in the galaxy. Others, like Mia and Ethan, believed they had finally found a place where humanity could truly belong, a challenge worthy of their ingenuity and determination. These differing visions for the future created friction within the human camp, with debates often escalating into arguments. Despite these divisions, life on Krithos continued. The humans expanded their settlements, building domed farms that thrived, despite the planet's harsh conditions. They shared their knowledge freely with the Crithians, teaching them how to purify water more efficiently and construct shelters resistant to acid rain. In return, the Crithians introduced the humans to ancient survival techniques honed over generations: how to read the subtle signs of an approaching storm, how to track prey through dense foliage, and how to navigate the treacherous terrain, using nothing but instinct. Yet beneath the surface of this uneasy collaboration, resentment simmered. Some Crithians resented the humans' reliance on technology, viewing it as a crutch that undermined true survival skills. Others felt overshadowed by the rapid advancements brought about by human ingenuity. For their part, many humans struggled with the constant danger of Krithos, longing for the comforts of their former lives, or at least something less perilous than a death world. Then came the day when everything changed. It started with tremors deep underground. So faint at first that no one paid much attention. Earthquakes were common on Krithos after all, caused by the same violent forces that shaped its rugged landscape. But these tremors were different. They grew stronger with each passing hour, shaking the ground violently enough to collapse tunnels and send boulders tumbling down cliffsides. By nightfall, the entire planet seemed alive with chaos. Varnock stood atop a ridge overlooking the human settlement, his glowing eyes scanning the horizon. The sky above churned with unnatural speed, clouds swirling into monstrous shapes that blocked out the stars. Lightning streaked across the heavens in jagged bursts, illuminating the terrified faces of both Crithians and humans below. Something was wrong, terribly wrong. Ethan joined him moments later, his face pale but determined. "What's happening?" he asked, shouting to be heard over the roaring winds. "It's the Heartstorm," Varnock replied grimly. "An event, spoken of in legends. A superstorm unlike any other, capable of tearing apart the planet itself." Ethan's jaw tightened. "How long do we have?" "Hours, maybe less," Varnock said. "No one has ever survived it." For a moment, they simply stared at each other, the weight of the situation pressing down on them. Then Ethan nodded. "We'll survive it, together." With time running out, the two groups sprang into action. The humans deployed every piece of technology they had: atmospheric stabilizers to counteract the storm's energy, shield generators to protect key areas, and automated drones to monitor the storm's movements. The Crithians, meanwhile, used their unparalleled knowledge of the land to guide evacuations, leading people to underground caverns and natural shelters that might offer some protection. But even combined efforts weren't enough. The Heartstorm was too vast, too powerful. Entire regions were swallowed by tornadoes that tore through the landscape like living beasts. Rivers of molten lava burst from fissures in the earth, consuming everything in their path. Acid rain poured from the skies in torrents, eating away at anything not protected by reinforced materials. In the midst of the chaos, a critical decision had to be made. The humans had developed a plan to divert part of the storm's energy using a device called an ion siphon, a massive machine capable of absorbing and redirecting electrical currents. However, the siphon needed to be placed directly in the storm's eye, a feat that required navigation through the most dangerous part of the tempest. It was a suicide mission, but someone had to do it. "I'll go," Ethan volunteered without hesitation. "I know the tech better than anyone." No, Varnock said firmly. You're needed here to coordinate the evacuation. I'll lead the team. Ethan opened his mouth to protest, but Varnock cut him off. This isn't up for debate. We need your mind, not your body. Trust me, I won't fail. And so, a small team of Crithians and humans set out into the heart of the storm. Varnock led the way, his towering frame cutting through the wind like a blade. Beside him walked Mia, her hands clutching a tablet displaying real-time data from the drones overhead. Behind them trailed warriors and engineers, each carrying vital components of the ion siphon. Every step was a battle against nature itself, the storm screaming in defiance as if determined to keep its secrets hidden. At one point, a massive bolt of lightning struck the group, knocking several members unconscious. Mia scrambled to revive them, her fingers flying over her tablet to recalibrate the remaining equipment. "We're losing power," she shouted. "If we don't stabilize the siphon soon, it won't hold." Varnock roared in frustration, his voice barely audible over the storm. "Keep moving," he ordered. "We're close, I can feel it." Finally, after what felt like an eternity, they reached the storm's eye. It was eerily calm, a stark contrast to the fury raging around them. In the center stood a swirling vortex of energy, crackling with raw power. Without hesitation, the team began assembling the ion siphon, working quickly despite their exhaustion. Hands blistered, muscles burned, but no one stopped. Not until the last piece clicked into place. Mia activated the device, her heart pounding as she watched the readings spike. The siphon hummed to life, drawing in the storm's energy and redirecting it harmlessly into the atmosphere. Slowly, painfully slowly, the vortex began to shrink. The winds died down, the lightning dimmed, and the rain eased into a gentle drizzle. "We did it," Mia whispered, tears streaming down her face. Varnock placed a hand on her shoulder, his expression unreadable. "Not yet," he said. "Let's get back before the storm decides to fight back." The journey back was just as harrowing as the trip in, but this time, hope buoyed their spirits. When they emerged from the storm, battered but alive, cheers erupted from those waiting anxiously below. Ethan rushed forward, gripping Varnock's arm tightly. "You saved us," he said, his voice thick with emotion. Varnock shook his head. "We saved each other," he corrected. "Remember that, in the days that followed, the aftermath of the heart storm became clear. Much of Crythos lay in ruins, its once proud cities reduced to rubble. Yet amidst the devastation, something remarkable had taken root. Unity. The Crithians and humans worked side by side to rebuild, sharing resources and labor without question. Old rivalries faded, replaced by a sense of purpose born from shared sacrifice. Dracor, who had once been the fiercest opponent of cooperation, stood silently as he watched humans and Crithians work together to repair a collapsed tunnel. For the first time, he understood that strength wasn't diminished by collaboration, it was amplified. Scylla approached him cautiously, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Do you see now?" she asked softly. "This is our future." Dracor nodded, though his voice remained gruff. "Perhaps, but let's hope it lasts." As the sun rose over Crythos, casting golden light across its scarred surface, the two species stood together, united by adversity. They had faced the ultimate test of survival, and emerged stronger for it. Crythos was still a death world, yes, but it was also something more, a testament to the power of unity, resilience, and hope. And somewhere deep within the hearts of both Crithians and humans, a new chapter began. A story not of conquest or rivalry, but of partnership. A story that would echo across the stars, inspiring others to look beyond differences and embrace the limitless possibilities of cooperation. The aftermath of the Heartstorm brought both devastation and transformation to Crythos. The planet bore scars that would take generations to heal. Entire regions were reduced to ash. Rivers of molten lava had carved new paths through the land, and the air remained heavy with the acrid scent of destruction. Yet amidst the ruins, something extraordinary was taking shape. A shared future. The Crythians and humans, once divided by suspicion and rivalry, now stood united, bound together by the trials they had endured and the sacrifices they had made. In the weeks following the storm, rebuilding efforts became the central focus for both species. Human engineers worked alongside Crythian builders, combining advanced technology with ancient techniques to construct structures capable of withstanding even the harshest conditions Krythos could throw at them. Domes of reinforced alloy protected crops from acid rain, while massive turbines harnessed the planet's relentless winds to generate power. Underground tunnels, expanded and fortified, connected settlements across vast distances, ensuring safe passage for all. But it wasn't just physical infrastructure that was being rebuilt. It was trust, understanding, and identity. For the Crythians, this period marked a profound shift in how they viewed themselves and their place in the universe. No longer did they see survival as solely a test of individual strength or instinct. They began to embrace the idea that resilience could come from cooperation, innovation, and adaptability. Stories of the Heartstorm spread among their people, not as tales of destruction, but as legends of unity. Songs were sung about Varnock and Ethan leading their respective teams into the storm's eye, symbolizing the merging of two worlds into one. For the humans, Krythos had become more than a refuge. It was home. They no longer saw themselves as outsiders struggling to survive on an alien planet. Instead, they viewed themselves as partners in shaping its destiny. Many who had initially doubted whether staying on Krythos was worth the cost now found purpose in contributing to its renewal. Engineers like Mia took pride in designing solutions tailored to the planet's unique challenges, while leaders like Ethan focused on fostering harmony between the two species. Slowly but surely, humanity's presence on Krythos ceased to be an anomaly and became an integral part of its story. Yet even as progress flourished, old tensions occasionally resurfaced. Some Crythians still clung to fears that their culture would be overshadowed by human influence. Dracor, though softened by recent events, remained wary. "We must preserve what makes us Crythian," he often reminded his peers during council meetings. "Our traditions, our ways, they are what kept us alive for centuries." Scylla, ever the voice of reason, countered him gently. "Preserving our past does not mean rejecting the future. Look around you, Dracor. Our traditions have grown stronger because we've learned to adapt. That is true survival." Her words resonated deeply, especially among the younger generation of Crythians who had grown up watching humans integrate seamlessly into their society. These young Crythians saw the humans not as invaders or threats, but as allies and friends. Children played together in the streets, learning each other's languages and customs. Elders shared stories of the old days, blending Crythian myths with human history to create a rich tapestry of shared heritage. Among the humans, similar shifts occurred. Those who had once yearned for a return to the stars began to realize that leaving Krythos would mean abandoning something precious, a community forged in adversity. Others, inspired by the planet's untamed beauty and the resilience of its people, dedicated themselves to exploring its mysteries. Scientists studied the ecosystems that thrived despite the harsh environment, uncovering secrets that could benefit civilizations across the galaxy. Artists captured the stark landscapes in paintings and sculptures, turning Krythos's brutality into breathtaking works of art. As time passed, the line between Crythian and human blurred. Marriages between the two species became increasingly common, producing children who embodied the best of both worlds. The strength and instincts of the Crythians combined with the ingenuity and adaptability of humanity. These hybrid offspring were celebrated as living symbols of unity, proof that differences could be bridged when survival depended on it. News of Krythos's transformation eventually reached other corners of the galaxy. Tales of a death world transformed into a beacon of hope spread far and wide, inspiring others to seek out partnerships rather than conquests. Diplomatic envoys arrived from distant planets, eager to learn from the Crythians and humans' example. Trade agreements were established, bringing much-needed resources to Krythos while exporting its innovations to other worlds. The planet, once shunned as too dangerous for contact, became a hub of interstellar cooperation. One visitor, a historian named Lyra from a neighboring system, spent months documenting the changes on Krythos. In her writings, she described the planet as a paradox wrapped in resilience. She wrote of towering storms that tested the limits of existence yet gave rise to unparalleled creativity, of venomous creatures lurking in shadows yet teaching lessons in caution and strategy, of two species seemingly worlds apart, yet finding common ground in the face of annihilation. Her final observation struck a chord with many. Krythos proves that survival is not about domination or isolation. It is about connection. It is about recognizing that we are stronger together than we are alone. Years later, Krythos stood as a testament to this truth. Its cities gleamed under protective domes, bustling with activity as Krythians and humans worked side by side. Its wilderness, though still untamed, was revered as a source of inspiration rather than fear. And its people, diverse yet united, carried within them the legacy of a planet that had tried to destroy them, and instead made them stronger. Varnock, now an elder himself, often reflected on how far they had come. He remembered the day the Yar, humans first arrived, fragile and uncertain, and marveled at how they had grown into equals. Standing beside Ethan one evening, watching the sunset paint the horizon in hues of gold and crimson, he spoke softly. "Do you think we would have survived without them?" Ethan smiled, his gaze steady. "Probably not, but I know we wouldn't have thrived without you." Their bond, forged in fire and tempered by storms, had become the foundation of a new era, an era where Krythos was no longer defined by death, but by life, by courage, by unity. And so the story of Krythos continued, not as a tale of conflict or despair, but as a legend of hope. A reminder that even in the darkest corners of the universe, light can emerge when hearts open to possibility. That even on a death world, life finds a way, and sometimes it blooms brighter than anyone could have imagined.